today we are talking about a super fascinating topic, which is how to optimize your nutrition and your training around your menstrual cycle in order to optimize your hormones and fat loss as well as muscle building. For quite a while, I believed that workouts that were for women were stupid, and to be fair, most of them are, because they're exactly the same as workouts for men. They just add a little bit more glute work and take away some trap work and maybe add in some cardio to lose fat, because you know every woman has to lose fat. But that's a rant for another day. The point that I want to make is that women are not little men. Women can benefit from training in a much different way than a male can. Most studies done on exercise are done either on men or on postmenopausal women, so they don't actually apply to menstruating individuals. Men operate on a 24-hour hormonal cycle. They are basically the same day to day, and they just fluctuate throughout the day. However, people who menstruate operate on a 28-day cycle. They do have 24-hour fluctuations, but overall, day to day, their hormones are different. And so the whole no pain, no gain, no days off mentality that actually does work for some men doesn't really work the same way for a female body. So in this video, I'm going to break down the menstrual cycle and how to optimize your training and nutrition around it to achieve your goals. And this video actually comes with a very exciting audiobook recommendation. I just finished listening to In the Flow by Alyssa VT, and that audiobook not only inspired me to really dive deeper into the research behind this, but it's also just a fascinating dive into biohacking from the female perspective, like taking the actual menstrual cycle into account. She not only goes into how your menstrual cycle affects nutrition and exercise, but also how it affects your productivity at work, your relationships, motherhood, day-to-day life, etc. And the audiobook, I believe, is over 9 hours long, so she's able to go into a lot more detail than I'm going to be able to in this video. So if you are at all interested in the topic, I cannot recommend it enough. It's so fascinating. And as always, this audiobook recommendation is brought to you by Audible, my favorite audiobook listening platform, and the only one that I use because they have literally everything that I could ever want. They have such a vast variety of audiobooks, and I love using it to keep myself educated and keep myself in the loop with all of the new health and fitness sciencey information that's coming out. Lately, as you guys know, I've been doing a little bit more cardio, going on some runs, jogs, half run, half walks, and so my audiobooks have been what have been getting me through the hard times of the cardio. But it's great because I can better my mind and my body at the same time. So I highly recommend you go check out Audible, and if you want to listen to In the Flow for free, you can go to audible.com/Marissa or text Marissa to 500-500. You will get a 30-day free trial of Audible, 1 free audiobook credit, which you can use to listen to In the Flow or literally anything, but recommend In the Flow. And you'll also get 2 free Audible originals. So again, link in description, check it out. And without further ado, let's get into it. Since I don't really trust the public education system to have taught you this, I certainly didn't learn this in school, we're gonna do a quick breakdown of the menstrual cycle, what it is, how it works, the fluctuations, etc. The menstrual cycle is a monthly hormonal cycle that a female body goes through in order to prepare for pregnancy. It's more than just your period. It's the full 28 to 32 days in which your brain, uterus, and ovaries communicate via hormones to keep the cycle going. During each menstrual cycle, the lining of the uterus is built up, and then an egg is released from the ovaries into the uterus. If the egg is not fertilized, then the lining from the uterus is shed and bleeding occurs, and then the cycle starts over again. Your menstrual cycle is counted from the first day of your period to the first day of your next period, and throughout this time, the hormones estrogen and progesterone, as well as testosterone and a bunch of other hormones, but we're just gonna focus mostly on estrogen and progesterone for now, fluctuate throughout the month, and then they end up back where they started at the beginning of the cycle. Just as a quick note though, if you are on hormonal birth control, you technically don't really have a cycle. You don't ovulate, your period isn't technically a real period, and your hormones are much more static throughout the month, as you can see from this graph. The only time your hormones really change is right before your period, so this doesn't apply as much to you, but you still might learn a lot from it, and you can definitely still follow this method. So the menstrual cycle is broken down into 4 phases, although technically you can also break it down into 2 phases because the menstrual phase is part of the follicular phase, and then ovulation marks the day between the follicular and luteal phase. But for the sake of breaking everything down, we're gonna divide it into the 4 phases. The first phase is the menstrual phase. This is marked as the first day that bleeding occurs, and this is when estrogen and progesterone are basically at their baseline low. And this can usually last from anywhere between 3 and 7 days. Next up is the follicular phase. This is where estrogen really starts to rise fairly rapidly. Progesterone is starting to rise a little bit, and testosterone also rises. And this lasts about 7 to 10 days. Next is the ovulatory phase, and this is when ovulation occurs. The egg is released from the ovaries. At this point, estrogen and testosterone peak and then start to drop off rapidly, and progesterone is also still slowly climbing at this point. This is more like an event than an actual phase, but for the sake of discussion, we're gonna call the ovulatory phase about 3 to 4 days when you hit your peak and then it starts to drop off. And lastly, we have the luteal phase. During this phase, estrogen does start to rise again and then starts to fall about halfway through. Progesterone reaches its peak high at the mid-luteal phase and then also starts to taper off in the second half of the phase. The luteal phase for most people is about 10 to 14 days, and the second half of the luteal phase tends to be the PMS phase, where you experience all of the unpleasant symptoms. But again, as a note, if you have intense, really bad PMS symptoms, that might be normal, but it is a sign that something's actually off. So if that is the case for you, highly recommend In the Flow. I also highly recommend Beyond the Pill by Dr. Jolene Brighton. Those books will go really far to help you sort out what your hormonal balances might be and how to fix them. So as you can see, for people who are menstruating, the hormone ratios change day to day, and so you are not the same person chemically one day to the next. So let's start with how this impacts exercise. The research is pretty conclusive in showing that there are tangible differences between endurance, ability to build muscle, lose fat, build strength, etc. between the different phases. So if you can learn to work with your body's natural fluctuations, you can optimize results. So let's start with the menstrual phase. Since the hormones are lowest at this point, you're going to have basically the lowest amount of energy. And due to these low hormones, doing intense exercise is actually counterproductive because it increases cortisol even more, which leads to fat storage and muscle wasting. So the best thing to do during this phase is more restorative work, like yin yoga, other light forms of yoga, walking, meditation, anything that's just really relaxing for your body. Although I will note that if you're bleeding for 7 days, you might feel that increase in energy after day 3 or 4, so you can totally listen to your body here. Just be more aware of it in the first few days of that phase. As you transition into the follicular phase, your estrogen levels start to rise, which is going to provide a lot more energy, strength, stamina, etc. Also, these rising estrogen levels contribute to a more normalized blood sugar level, which means you have easier access to carbs for fuel, and so you really have a lot more stamina and energy to just crush your workouts. Research shows that not only are you at your strongest during this phase, it's actually a lot easier for the body to build muscle and to lose fat. In a 2017 study published in the Journal of Sports Medicine and Physical Fitness, researchers took a group of women and divided them into 3 groups. One who would train legs at high volume during the first half of their cycle, the follicular phase, a group of women who would train legs at high volume during the second half of their cycle, the luteal phase, and then a group of women who trained at moderate volume throughout their entire cycle. And they did this over the course of 4 cycles, and what they found is that the women who trained with more volume in the first half of their cycle experienced significant increases in strength and lean mass, as opposed to the second group that only trained in the latter half of their cycle that experienced no appreciable increases in strength and lean mass. So in short, the follicular phase is your time to grind, to really push yourself, to do high volume resistance training. If you enjoy HIIT, this is the time to do it. If you enjoy cardio, if you're training for a marathon, this is the time to really push your endurance and the intensity of your workouts. So at the end of the follicular phase, ovulation occurs, and this is where estrogen and testosterone peak, and so you will notice a peak in performance. Studies show that you will experience a peak in strength as well as potentially the highest shear force generation capacity that you can throughout the month. So this is the ideal time to attempt a PR and to really like push yourself to max out on whatever it is that you're working on. Although I will note that like not everyone should be training super intensely, but like if you can, if you want to, this is the time to like get it. A study done in 1996 analyzed different phases of the menstrual cycle for endurance, strength, and contractile abilities. They took a group of women and studied them over the course of 2 cycles, breaking the cycle down into 5 phases: the early and mid follicular phase, ovulation, and the early and mid luteal phase. They found that there was a significant increase of about 11% in quadriceps and hand grip strength during the ovulatory phase. So this isn't just like a small fraction of like 1 to 2% increase. This is over 10%. Like, that's a lot of extra strength. And as a note, they also found that women who were on hormonal birth control did not experience the same increases in strength. So again, if you're on hormonal birth control, you don't really have the same fluctuations. But in short, this is the peak time to like crush your workouts, hit a PR, go after it, and just win at life in the gym. But from there, moving into the luteal phase, the decrease in estrogen and testosterone as well as blood sugar levels means you're gonna have a lot less energy and endurance. So smashing out a really intense workout is going to be a lot less efficient in this phase. During the first half of the luteal phase, you actually still have a good amount of estrogen and progesterone, so you do have some amount of energy, but it's not as much as the follicular phase. So this is a really good time to aim for maintenance, to kind of scale back the cardio and intense HIIT workouts and just go on pure strength, things like, you know, resistance training or Pilates if you enjoy that kind of thing, but definitely scale back on the cardio. During the second half of the phase though, as your hormones are dropping off, this is when your energy and endurance are really going to hit a low, so you want to focus on more restorative exercises similar to the menstrual phase where you're doing more mobility work. This is a great time to add in mobility, things like yoga, walking, just light restorative exercise. Not only will you have less energy to smash out intense workouts, but intense workouts, if you're trying to lose fat or build muscle during this phase, will actually be counterproductive. The brief overview of it is that cortisol is a hormone that when it's elevated for too high or too long, it leads to fat storage and muscle wasting. Exercise increases cortisol, and cortisol responsivity is higher when estrogen and progesterone are lower. So if you do an intense workout, you spike your cortisol, it's going to spike a lot higher than it would if you did that during the follicular phase. So this is why HIIT or intense workouts are really not your friend during the latter half of the luteal phase. You benefit much more from a work smarter, not harder mentality. Some research also suggests that you're more likely to get an injury during the last few days of your follicular phase as well as the first few days of menstruation. There's a 2019 study done on 20 female athletes who suffered concussions. What they found is that over 50% of those women were in the end of the luteal phase or the first few days of their menstrual cycle, and the rest were just spread out throughout the cycle. However, there's also research to suggest that women are more prone to ACL injury during their follicular phase, so it's a little bit contradictory. Basically, just stay safe, use good form, don't injure yourself. So I know this is a lot of information, it might be a little bit overwhelming, so what I actually did is I compiled all of this into a neatly organized PDF document that you can download via the link in the description. It gives like the full breakdown of the cycle, when to increase intensity, decrease intensity, exercise ideas for different phases of the cycle, etc. So make sure you download that so you can plan your workouts around your cycle a lot easier. But also remember, these are just guidelines. Things can fluctuate. Other things can affect how your body's going to respond to workouts. So if you're in the middle of your follicular phase and you're like, heck yeah, I should be crushing it, but I'm like really tired, maybe listen to your body and don't like push it really hard just because you're in the follicular phase. And in adjusting to this cycle of training, it's really important to break out of the more is better, like no pain, no gain, go hard or go home mentality, because as you can see, more is not always better in every single phase. You will get optimal results if you work with your body rather than against it. Now let's take a look at how your cycle affects optimal nutrition. If you have a menstrual cycle, you probably know how much it can affect your appetite and cravings. The good news is that this is not all in your head. There's actually a reason that you feel more hungry right before your period, and eating more won't sabotage your efforts. During the first half of your phase, through menstruation, the luteal phase, and right through ovulation, you actually have a slower or normal metabolism. Due to higher estrogen levels, your blood sugar levels are actually a lot more stable, which means you can a lot more easily get away with being in a deficit. Also, since your blood sugar levels are more stable, this gives you easier access to carbs for fuel, so this is the ideal time to eat higher carb if you want to. During the second half of your cycle, your metabolic rate actually increases from anywhere between 8 to 16%, which can translate to burning anywhere from 90 to 250 extra calories per day. Many studies demonstrate this increase in metabolic rate through the increase in calorie consumption between the two phases. There was a 1983 study, for example, that took a group of 34 women and measured their calorie intake in the follicular and luteal phase, and they found that it was significantly higher in the luteal phase. This increase in appetite is believed to be due to the fact that progesterone has an inhibitory effect on estrogen activity, and since estrogen inhibits appetite, then inhibiting the estrogen increases your appetite. Additionally, since you have less estrogen, you'll be producing less serotonin, which can lead to the increase in cravings for simple carbs. However, just a thing worth noting is that if you give in to all these cravings for simple carbs, it could actually exacerbate PMS symptoms due to the blood sugar spikes, so it is best to not give into those cravings every single time you have one. But the short of it is that since you have a faster metabolism, more cravings, less blood sugar regulation, it's nearly impossible to stick to a restrictive diet. Also, since your progesterone is higher, you're actually a little bit more insulin resistant, which means your body's gonna have a lot harder time losing fat. So you are battling against your body if you're trying to lose fat during the latter half of your luteal phase. Remember, work with your body, not against it. The luteal phase is a great time to do a refeed and let yourself eat at maintenance. So, practical takeaways. If you've seen my video on how to lose fat, which I will link down in the description if you want to check that out, you will know that I recommend that for every 2 to 3 weeks you spend in a deficit, you spend 1 to 2 weeks at maintenance to prevent metabolic adaptation so that your deficit periods are fast and efficient. To sync this strategy with your menstrual cycle, what I recommend is either spending the first 2 weeks, the follicular phase, in a deficit, and then in the luteal phase go back to maintenance, or if you're really trying to push it even harder, you can spend the first 3 weeks of your cycle in a deficit, and then the last week definitely at maintenance. This also means if you're bulking or trying to reverse diet, you can get away with a bigger surplus in the follicular phase because your body is more inclined to build muscle. So it's going to take more of those calories and put them towards building muscle and building strength. Whereas in the latter half, the follicular phase, you should be a little bit more conservative with your surplus because you're not going to be as efficient at turning those calories into muscle mass. And lastly, if you want to carb cycle with your cycle, you can have increased carbs in the first half and then decreased carbs in the second half of your cycle. Again, the free PDF that I have linked down in the description also does a whole breakdown on the nutrition aspect of things, so I definitely recommend downloading that if you just want a quick reference guide for all of this information. And if you guys want me to do a video about specifically what foods to eat throughout your cycle to optimize hormone balance, definitely let me know down in the comments. But if you want the answer to that question right now, then make sure you go to audible.com/Marissa or text Marissa to 500 to get yourself free trial of Audible and 1 free audiobook credit, which you can use to listen to In the Flow, which goes into a lot more detail on this topic. If you have any questions about anything that I talked about, leave them down in the comments below. I'd be more than happy to do like a follow-up Q&A on this, or if you want me to expand on any topic in particular, also let me know, because I was just so fascinated doing all this research. I would love to do a deeper dive on anything. So again, leave a little comment. Let me know if you learned anything, if you're going to apply any of this, or if you have applied it. Definitely let everyone know how it's been working for you. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up because it really does support me and my channel, and I really genuinely appreciate it. Please share this video with your friends, your family, put it on Facebook, share it on Twitter. Everyone needs to know this information because it is not taught in schools. We need to get this out there so that women can learn how to train and eat effectively for their bodies rather than getting caught in this endless yo-yo loop that gets you nowhere. If you want to see more videos from me all about health and fitness, you can check them out over here. To see future videos from me all about health and fitness, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the little notification bell so you get notified when I post a video, and I will see you very soon. Bye.